So, good news, fellow plebs. Following the roaring success of winners such as freedom of movement and mass immigration, our betters have come to the conclusion that the cities are in fact a bit crowded. So, they've got a new one for us, which is going to be freedom from movement. Specifically, they're introducing 15-minute cities. Now, you've probably heard about this in the news because it's that traffic management thing that Oxford is doing. It's not particularly worrisome, is it? I mean, after all, who could be against a couple of filters that just do a little bit of traffic management? Sounds entirely sensible. And after all, who wouldn't like the idea of a 15-minute city? Because, if you can have everything that you need, you can have all of your leisure and work, and it's all 15 minutes from your home. I mean, what's not to like? Now, as Davos is getting going, I believe we're on the first day of the main event today, when they start getting into the talks and the stuff like that. It's worth looking at their plans on this one, even though the 15-minute city is something that they don't feel they even need to talk about this time, because we've moved into the implementation phase. Before I get into that, let's just show one of our premium things, which is the politics of the Hunger Game, which I think is going to be quite relevant to this segment. So, 15-minute cities, where did that idea come from? Well, the idea is apparently one of Carlos Moreno's, who is a Chilean-born city planner. And he really introduced this idea to the COP21 event in Paris in 2015, where we get the Paris Accords from these days. And he introduced four key characteristics that a 15-minute city must have. And these are: 1, proximity, obviously; diversity, again, obviously, because you can never have enough diversity; and 3, density, got to pack people in; and ubiquity. If you don't know what that means, basically it means it's for poor people. Now, the story goes that this type of thinking was just utopian dreaming until the pandemic came along, where government types noticed that people were choosing to stay quite close to their home. They were sticking to sort of 15 minutes of their home.
Well, because we were prosecuted if you went on a walk for longer than an hour.
Well, yes, that's a good point, because we were sort of propagandised and coerced. And in this country, in the UK, police were literally harassing people and asking to see where they started their journey from. They didn't have the powers to do that, but they didn't understand that. They just thought that they should do that.
If you took an extra lap round the prison yard, you don't get shower privileges, I suppose.
Now, enter WEF member and Paris mayor Anne Hidalgo. Now, she made the 15-minute city a key part of her re-election campaign recently. And apparently she was working on this well before the pandemic, because her election was in early 2020. So I think that it came from that aforementioned Paris Accords event. So this was the United Nations Framework on Climate Change, or the UNFCCC, something like that. And it featured heavily contributions from C40. What is C40? Well, C40 is a collaboration of the world's 40 largest cities. Well, it started that way. It's now almost 100 cities are in that list. And it emerged from the Clinton Foundation, so you know that it comes from good stock.
That explains the inclusive and equitable climate action concern that's chief listed among that banner there.
Now, in July 2020, this C40, they published something they called an implementation guide. I think we can throw that up on the screen. Yeah, Implementation Guide, July 2020, How to Build Back Better with a 15-Minute City.
I thought just everyone saying that phrase all at once was a conspiracy theory.
It may well be. The conspiracy theory is to say that a load of cities around the world didn't read this and instantly sign up for it. It wasn't a backroom deal at that COP event, definitely not, no. Apparently, within a few weeks of reading this, cities such as Barcelona, Bogota, Buenos Aires, Melbourne, Milan, Paris and Portland, they all signed up for this programme, but they were going to convert themselves into 15-minute cities. But you don't really want to convert a mega city like those into a 15-minute city without being sure that you know what you're doing. Now, this is where it starts to get a bit spicy, you see, because enter the investment firm NREP, who apparently is a Nordic investment company with nothing but billions of dollars at their disposal. And they did a tie-in with the C40 where they said that they were going to go off and find smaller cities to trial it, to make it work. And so they set out to find at least 5 cities, 5 second-tier cities that they could put it into. Now, personally, I have absolutely no idea how a firm with connections to the sort of murky world that UN types and Clinton operatives swim in with nothing at their disposal other than billions of dollars, could possibly go about achieving something like this. So anyway, slight break in the segment. I'm now going to pick up a completely different theme. Councillors in Oxford and Canterbury suddenly woke up one morning and decided that they wanted to implement a 15-minute city. I'm sure they had that idea all by themselves. Maybe it came to them in a dream or something like that. Oxford went first. They started off with a public consultation on this wonderful new idea. The public consultation recorded 93% of people against it, so they took this as affirmation that they should immediately proceed at full speed. Now, the really weird thing for me about this whole 15-minute city thing is, why can I not find anyone talking about this? I mean, Oxford people are talking about it. A couple of people on our side, GB News types, they're speaking about it. Lotus is speaking about it.
There's local residents in Canterbury that aren't too happy that they can't drive from their house to the supermarket anymore. There's people in Bath that have seen similar measures coming. Ask any Addison Lee or Uber driver that drove me to the GB News studio over the last couple of years from my place in Kent, London, all the way to central London, and they will say Sadiq Khan is ruining this city by putting flower boxes everywhere. Why is he shutting roads? I can't understand it. They're not too delighted.
But one question I had to ask you, Connor, because I don't watch any BBC anymore, I don't watch any mainstream media, is you actually still watch BBC Question Time, don't you?
Yes.
I asked you, had this come up?
No.
Odd. Why is nobody talking about this idea?
Their entire packed-out NHS audience, which is definitely not astroturfed at all, must just not drive all that much.
But it should be the sort of thing that we're talking about, because this isn't a new idea. We are rehashing an old Soviet-era idea. So check this out. This is this is one example of the sort of thing that I'm talking about. It was the Ideal Communist City, published in 1968 out of Moscow University. This is just one of many examples, by the way, of this type of thinking that was going on during the Soviet era, about how can we segregate people, how can we put them in districts. I'll make sure this is in the reading links so you can go and have a look at it yourself, but there's a whole book there on the reasons you want to do it. I have had a bit of a skim read myself. Funnily enough, there's quite a lot of overlap between this and the implementation guide that I mentioned earlier on.
I would say, yeah, the implementation guide had the subheading food there, and I wonder if the Soviets had a particular need to redistrict things in order to ensure that the bread lines weren't too long when rations started coming in. So I might suspect, in the 2030 predictions that said meat will only be a treat, you will eat less of it, that if meat is no longer on the menu and we're all having to eat cricket protein and that, if there were some sort of calamity that restricted the food supply, then you do have to keep a tight control of the population so that if they're all living in these giant megacities in their pods, they don't just start rioting and devouring each other. So you do need a bread line within a 15-minute walk of absolutely everyone.
Look, and I'm not alleging anything, but if a globalist organisation with strong links to the Clinton Foundation, the UN and the WEF, is trying to implement a Soviet-era ideal of segregating cities into this country, I cannot imagine why this would not be of interest to national politicians and why I was unable to find any quotes on this subject, as if it's just, that's just something that's happening, get over it, it's just a traffic management. You don't need to concern yourself with it, or we don't even need to comment on it. This is a weird thing that, again, is being sort of sneaked under the radar. And let's pause for a moment and consider what is actually being delivered in these cities that are putting them in, because it's full of promises. It's full of, everything that you need is on hand. You can have a perfect work-life balance, loads of leisure activity and work opportunities close to your home. Have they actually implemented any of those things? No, they've just talked about them. What have they actually implemented? Barriers and cameras. That's the thing that has actually been delivered. The rest of it is all fluff. So I want to make a couple of quick obvious points here. Obvious point number one. At the moment, Oxford is saying that you can leave your district 100 days a year in your car. Well, that will obviously be reduced over time. You can walk out of your district. Presumably that's not going to change anytime soon until the next hysteria or lockdown or whatever it is that changes that. But that 100 days is going to come down. Obvious point number two. More cities are going to be included on this. I mean, we've got Oxford and Canterbury at the moment, and I think you mentioned Bath.
Bath is also implementing
is that
policies.
Official?
That has been reported
really?
in other outlets, yeah.
And obvious point number three, that the fines will go up for leaving the districts and the barriers will get bigger and there'll be more cameras. So we know that's happening. We know that we're getting cameras and barriers, and you can't even make the argument that it's really about what they say it is, because another tack that they put across with this is for the climate. It's to reduce CO2. But how can that possibly be true? Because if you want to, let's say you live in the centre of Oxford, and you could have a situation where somebody lives near the centre of Oxford, and they at the moment they have a short journey where they go from their home to kids' school number 1, kids' school number 2, and then on to work, and that might take you four districts. And at the moment, it's a relatively short trip and they get it done. Under this scheme, all of those could be in different districts. So you'd have to drive from your home all the way out to the ring road, go round, all the way in, out, round, all the way, and just keep repeating that process. So it drastically increases journey times. It drastically increases the amount of CO2 you're committing. So it doesn't even hold up on its own merits.
Well, it does, though, because if you do the 2030 prediction and run it out to its logical endpoint, you won't actually need to travel anywhere not on foot or on public transport at all, remember, because you get everything you ever need delivered to you to be rented via drone, which are obviously renewably powered. So you won't need to go on shopping trips for your family. Your pod school will be within 15 minutes. Your gym will be built into your high-rise complex. Your apartment will only be small. And if everything's incredibly homogenous, why would you need to leave your city if all of the mini-districts look practically identical? I can speak to two more things, by the way. As you said about the cameras, there's a reason why it's being brought in at the same time as the concept of smart cities, where they're actively trying to build in things like 5G along the Belt and Road that China's stretching into Africa. And Canada, I believe we may have purchased them as well. I need to be fact-checked on that, but Canada definitely has facial recognition cameras to be implemented along major city streets from the Chinese Communist Party. Linking that up with the digital ID being rolled out in the prior segment, which looks at your photographs and any other information they need to identify you for all government departments, to do with the disclosure and barring service, which gives out criminal fines. That's obviously going to be a way of grading you for jaywalking on the social credit system. The last one is as well, I lived in Oxford for about 3 or 4 months last summer while I was teaching at the uni. And what happened was, when I drove in to move my stuff in and out, only in actually, we encountered all of their Euler zones, because they've implemented lots of Euler zones in Edinburgh, Bath, Oxford, loads of cities. I covered this in my first ever segment for Lotus Ears. And the zones are, as you described before, that sort of intentional bureaucratic impediment to inconvenience you out of a behaviour and nudge you towards another one. They're deliberately obtuse as to where you don't know where the start and finish point is, because the signs say it starts in 100 metres, but it doesn't say a deliberate sign that says Euler Zone here. You actually have to pull up a map ahead of time on your phone to look at the roads, but they don't even name the roads on the map. It's just a zoomed out thing of, all this is blue and interconnected, and the rest of it is
soft entrapment process.
Yeah, so all you do is, if I don't know which roads are the ring roads that I won't be penalised in and out of my zone for, I guess I'll just take the bus. Oh, and I have to use my social credit system to do that. And I best not tweet it so that I'm not inconvenienced and I can't use that system anymore.
It's that thing that we keep on talking about, adding friction to it so that you give up and you do what they want you to do. Okay, so there are obviously two big agendas here, and I think one of them is possibly a bit of a red herring. So one of the agendas is just the pure anti-car stuff. This probably resonates more with the sort of yogurt weaving eco twats in sandals that populate Oxford Council, or I don't know. I've never met any of these people. Maybe they're lovely people.
The Stop Killing Cyclists group lobby.
I think they are mostly useful idiots. They're just pushing the standard eco-mentalist thinking of we've got to do this green stuff, even if it does increase CO2 massively, because these people can't really think.
They're foot soldiers in the streets to manufacture consent.
And I think they're the useful idiots in this. I think there's a much bigger agenda at work going on here, and this is actually one of the big themes of the WEF. Now, I want to turn your attention to a WEF article which went up, and this was sort of required reading for people attending the WEF this year. And let's have a quick look at the picture. Global risks when the turbulent 20s. So, what are their risks? And what's that picture? Well, that is a picture of people protesting in the street, presumably against their government or something like that. Let's go and have a look at the actual list of things that they think are major risks. So if we go down a little bit, there is going to be a section with some nice charts, bar charts. Maybe a little bit further.
Just keep scrolling, John.
There we go. There we go. The nice coloured chart. So this is their top 10 risks.
Oh my God, this is what Sadiq Khan tweeted out the other day. I responded to it, and I literally asked him, Sadiq, are you signed up to their 2030 predictions of owning nothing and being happy? He took this screenshot and tweeted it out. That is, I will get up the link as you're talking.
Now this is interesting. If you look at these top 10 risks, so these are the things that the people who attend the WEF are most concerned about. You look at 2 year, okay, cost of living. Well, that's something that they basically gave us, and there's nothing that the people at the WEF are going to do about it because they've engineered the situation where we get the cost of living. Natural disasters, extreme weather. Well, yeah, fluff. They're not going to. That's out of their hands. I mean, they can't control the weather. Economic confrontation. So they're thinking of the Ukraine war, aren't they? But again, that is not something that they're going to get involved in. Failure to mitigate climate change. Again, fluff. So what is the first real concern on that list? Erosion of social cohesion and society polarisation. Now, what do they mean by erosion of social cohesion? Do they mean stuff like, women being hostile to men, pushed by a feminist agenda? No, they don't mean that. Do they mean things like different racial groups at loggerheads? No, they absolutely love that stuff. Do they want intergenerational conflicts or conflicts between cis and trans? No, again, they love all of those conflicts. So what do they mean by a lack of social cohesion? What they mean is people pushing back against their governments.
Yeah, kicking back against the global homogenization of their culture because they don't want to erase the parochiality of where they grew up and where they inherited.
That's their top concern. And you look at 10 years as well. Start removing the fluff from the 10 years. Climate change fluff, biodiversity fluff, yep.
Large-scale involuntary migration.
They're pushing that, so that's obviously not a concern for them. Natural fluff again. The top concern on the 10-year list that is something that they're actually doing anything about. It's subtly disguised on this, but the top concern is erosion of social cohesion and societal polarisation.
Klaus Schwab literally said we're going to see a very angry world very soon.
The exact point I was about to make. This is not new for this event. If you go back to previous events, and I've watched a whole bunch of these events for years now, they are always banging on about this. Klaus is always saying that there is an angrier world coming. They're always showing imagery of people protesting and being violent and pushing back and basically getting upset with the state. So I put it like this. The top concern of globalist organisations and people who attend those organisations, their top concern is people pushing back against the government. These very same people are also implementing 15-minute cities throughout the world. And these 15-minute cities sell themselves on stuff like a vision of convenience and how you'll have everything close at hand, while actually delivering cameras and barriers that lock you into a section. Why would an organisation whose biggest concern is social unrest and people pushing back against their governments want to see every city around the world put up barriers and cameras that basically lock people into their particular zone?
To scare you into compliance?
Well, and also, I mean, how would you do something like the Canadian truckers' protest if there's barriers everywhere? Because they could have stopped that before it started by, the trucks coming in from all sides, barriers up. Problem solved. You try and organise against the government on any sort of meaningful way until they get their central bank digital currencies, of course, when they just stop your money from working if you protest against them. Again, it's coming in under the radar. It is this it's just a traffic management scheme in Oxford. It's nothing to worry about. You just go along with it. It's not going to be too bad. We get it through the public consultation. We will deem it a success, even if 93% of people push back against it, as they did with the prior consultation.
Yeah, the Euler Zone, which Sadiq Khan did, which I've sent you the link to, John, if you don't mind pulling up in a second.
They established some soft barriers, and then over time those barriers will become more and more established. Let's have a look at the Sadiq Khan thing that you found.
Yes, I responded to this the other day. Look, it's the exact list. In the next decade, failure to tackle climate emergency will have devastating consequences for the world's economy, from more extreme weather to forced mass migration. Like the London Bridge that flooded only because you put up the barriers to stop people driving. I'm taking action now to make our city and its economy greener, fairer and more sustainable. He's citing the WEF. He is taking action. So that means that all of the traffic management schemes, the Euler Zone, which penalises you for driving into the city, that is just to try to prevent you from entering London outside the districts that he wants to segment the city up into.
Yeah, and you try organise anything like the trucker protest after this has been implemented. I kind of want to give the last word to Frank Zappa. Take a look at this. The illusion of freedom will continue as long as it is profitable to continue the illusion. At the point where the illusion becomes too expensive to maintain, they will just take down the scenery. They will pull back the curtains and move the tables and chairs out of the way, and you will see the brick wall at the back of a theatre. Now, I am not saying we are there now. What I am saying is that the people who run the world envisage that we are going to get to this point. It has been their top concern that they've been talking about for years. They have been warning about people rising up against their government. They envisage a world where, for whatever reason that they foresee, we are going to be really angry at our governments and we're going to be really unhappy and we're going to want to push back. And what they are doing is they are implementing programs, not just here, this is one example of it, but on a whole range of different things that give them the tools that when this day comes, they're not caught with their pants down.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the Contemplation series, this episode on morality. And if you'd like to find out what else we're putting out, you can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.